We recognize that CVUUS gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect their spiritual relationship to the land. We hope to learn from them how we can live together in balance with the earth. While I could not find information about how or if the Abenaki celebrates Mother's Day, we will have the opportunity to learn more about our Abenaki neighbors this June 17th and 18th, when the Abenaki Heritage Weekend will be celebrated at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum here in Addison County. There will be workshops, drumming, dancing, and singing, and it would be wonderful if someone might organize a group trip for the congregation to go spend time together and learn more and bring that back to us. Welcome to this. Good morning. Welcome to this Mother's Day. If you are visiting this morning, we're glad to see you. If you're returning after being away, welcome back. And if this is your first time worshiping with us, welcome, welcome. If you need hearing assistance, in the back they have devices that will help with that. You could also consign our guest book in the foyer and get our newsletter. And I hope that everyone will join us downstairs after the service for fellowship in our fellowship hall called the Ian Ross Fellowship Hall. We have some different pathways for connection, which are in your order of service. I highlight that the Rhubarb Festival is coming June 3rd, and they'll be down there signing people up to do things. Also, this Wednesday via Zoom, there'll be a discussion of the second half of the book Asian American Histories of the U.S., which was published by Beacon Press. We hope some more people will join us there. And then finally, next weekend after the service, we will be celebrating Barnaby's tenure as our minister with a luncheon and party downstairs. And we still have some jobs and some donations of salads that we could use. We definitely are looking for 2 people who can grill on our gas grill. I will have a clipboard downstairs, so please don't run away from me. Sign up. There's different kinds of salads and things you can do. And if you can't make it Sunday, I have a great out for you, which is that Saturday at 5 p.m. we're going to meet to decorate the hall downstairs. So you can come on Saturday if you can't make it Sunday. It's something for everyone. And now I'd like to ask Steve and Rich to come up. They have a special announcement for us this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Steve Meyer.
And I'm Rich Wolfson, and we're here this morning with an announcement and some important information about our congregation's financial situation. First, some context. CVUUS prepares a budget each spring for the budget year beginning July 1st. We also conduct a pledge drive, our canvass, to raise most of the needed funds. We recently completed a very successful canvass led by Kate Gridley and John Barstow, which raised more than we've ever raised before. Thank you to John and Kate, and thanks to all, it's now over 100, who have pledged to support our congregation.
Yet, despite everyone's generosity, wonderful generosity, there is still a significant gap between what we've raised so far and what we need to keep the lights on, pay our staff fairly, and continue the programming and services that are vital to the life of our congregation. So the CVUUS board has asked Rich and me to lead a short-term effort to try to close the gap. And as you can see, we said yes. Brett Millier has also wonderfully accepted our invitation to join us, and we'd welcome others as well. We know we want to get on with the rest of the service. There's a wonderful Mother's Day service coming, but we know all of you will have questions. We won't go through the details here. We will be available downstairs after the service and for the next couple of weeks. There'll be a letter with a lot more information going out early this week. Look for that. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're looking forward to talking with many of you directly. Thanks in advance for whatever you can do to help meet this challenge. We've done it before, and we are confident we can do it again.
Thanks, Steve. And this is a short-term effort. In addition to that, the board is planning to convene a team this summer to make a more careful review of our financial challenges and report back by the end of the year. So they expect to have multiple opportunities for congregational discussion. But for now, for this short-term effort, every dollar we raise in the next 2 weeks will be that much less that we need to either cut from the budget or take from our fairly limited long-term reserves. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we now move into the worship part of our service on this Mother's Day morning, I hope that you have each had a chance to think about your own mother or grandmother or others who have mothered you in some way. Thinking about women on whose shoulders we stand has been an important part of my practice of gratitude. In 2015, I had Grandmother's Garden, which I think there'll be a slide of, designed and planted at the summer camp at which I was the director, so that everyone at camp would have time to be reminded of the women whose lives came before them and on whose shoulders they stand. I invite you to take a moment now to call to mind the spirit of the important women from your life, to gather them with us so that you and we may be surrounded by the women on whose shoulders we stand today. And now please stand as you are able in body or spirit to sing, "Gather the Spirit." really quite powerful to have all that singing kind of wash over you and look out and see all of you singing together. Our chalice lighting this morning is from Claudine Olivia. If you'll join me while Barnaby lights the chalices. We light this chalice for mothers and mothering, to celebrate those who have taken on the task of nurturing a young one, baby, child, or youth into adulthood, to celebrate those who have nourished the light of truth and compassion in growing minds and hearts, to celebrate those who have committed time, money, energy to the growth of others in this world. We light this chalice to celebrate and hold dear this flame of love. And now, out of order of service, we are going to ask the choir to come up to sing so that the children who are here this morning have a chance to hear the choir before they have their time for our ages.
Now, normally, I would have gone out front to hear the choir, but I came in early to listen because I knew I had to be back out of the way to have my nails painted. And, you know, when you agree to be a worship associate, there's all kinds of things you can be asked to do. But this is the first time in my 11 years I've asked the worship associate to paint my nails during the service. Now, let me explain what's going on here. And I really miss the days when, the pre-COVID days, when we might have as many as 20 children lined up here, because then I would have invited each one of them to get involved in the nail painting, and it might have taken up half the service. But it's a really good story. There's a minister named Joanna Fontaine Crawford who grew up as a Unitarian Universalist. So Gina, your kids would be in the position she was growing up. She went to a lot of services as a youngster, and she grew up to be a minister. And when she was a minister, she had a situation where there was a young mother in her congregation, a single mother who didn't have a daddy to help raise the kids. And she had a daughter and a younger son. And the younger son watched his mother and his sister paint their nails, and he thought, that really looks like, that looks like a lot of fun. I want to do that too. And so they all three started doing it, and he really loved the variety of colors. He experimented a lot. His fingers were never just one color. And he was really ecstatic about all this until he started wearing his fingers with nail polish to school. And then you can imagine what might have happened. The other boys started teasing him, they started bullying him, and they took all of the joy out of how much he loved painting his fingers. So her mother at church mentioned this to a few friends, and somehow the word got out. And the following Sunday, after the mother mentioned this to her friends, men of all ages, young men, the men who were businessmen in Austin, Texas, who normally wore suits and ties, old men, showed up, and quite a few of them had their fingers painted, and they brought extra paint to put on anybody else's fingers who wanted them during social hour. And I think of this as an example of radical love. It would have been very loving for them just to come with their fingers painted, but they brought enough for other people to paint their fingers as well. So, you know, I often talk to you about what's radical love, what's that extra step you can take to bring even more love into it. So anyway, the child saw all of these painted fingers, and his just filled with wonder. He's like, oh my, and he was really joyful. And Joanna, the minister, was really joyful too, even though she knew that no one would remember anything she was going to say for the rest of the service. That the real sermon was what was going on there and in coffee hour. And the sermon was, there are different ways to be a man in our society. There are ways to be caring. And that night, the boy asked his mother about all those other boys at the service with their painted nails. And and the mother said, well, they're Unitarian Universalists. And the boy said, are we Unitarian Universalists? And his mother said, well, I am. And the boy thought about it, and he said, I'm one too. So I wanted to share the story because we have a lot of things that we try to teach our children in religious exploration. And Poppy, our DRE, who's sitting over here, does an amazing job of this. But sometimes the teaching goes on in the congregation. In fact, a lot of the times the teaching goes on in the congregation in ways that aren't as obvious. And the congregation learns from this too. It learns a new way of being together. It learns to look out for everyone, even the little kids that they don't often see in the service. So this is all flowing out from one word, and I'll share this word with the children. You've probably heard this word, compassion. It means feeling what someone else is feeling. And compassion across all of the ages is one of the things that we work on here. And we sometimes say we are the hands and feet of love. That means we use our feet to go where love is needed, and we use our hands to do what's needed to make the world more loving. And every now and then we use our fingernails. So I will bring the paints, the fingernail paint downstairs, and we will allow some I should check this with Poppy. It's her supplies. I dare you to say no at this point. But meanwhile, let's sing the children off to religious exploration that's planned for them over in Fenn House with Let Us Open Our Eyes. And the words are on the screen. So last week, Avi, who introduced the idea on the donations team that we should support the Have a Heart food shelf, introduced the food shelf. But this week, we have someone who has worked to put the food shelf together, Allison Pouliot, to share a little bit about what this has all meant to her.
Good morning. My name's Allison Pouliot. I live in Bristol, and I'm here representing Have a Heart Food Shelf. Thanks for inviting me to speak on behalf of the food shelf and to share why I choose to volunteer for this service. The mission of the food shelf is to provide food and essential items free of charge to any person who lives in Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, New Haven, and Starksboro. And recipients of food are not asked to provide any documentation of need. All recipients are treated with dignity, kindness, respect, and confidentiality. The food shelf was established in 1990 and is supported primarily through individual donations, small grants, and local food drives. And we serve approximately 200 people each month. And last year we served 1,150 families in our area. And then in August of last year, we began serving 9 families as part of the migrant outreach program in the 5 towns. I began volunteering about 15 years ago when my children were in high school, and my intent at that point was to set an example of service to those who are in need, to my kids. We volunteered together for several years, and then when they graduated and went off to college, I continued to volunteer as a means to give back to my community. It gives me great satisfaction to interact with the clients and to provide them with food which is greatly needed and in most cases gratefully accepted. My role has evolved over the years, and I now serve as one of 3 volunteer coordinators as well as the treasurer for the group. I've been so blessed in my life, and I strongly believe that and as much as you did it for the less of my brethren, you did it for me. And that's really at the root of why I choose to serve. I'm sorry, I've had a tough week, so I apologize. And I wanted to just read a a testimonial letter that we received. Dear neighbors, like so many others in these especially difficult times, I suddenly find myself struggling in ways I have not before. Never in my life have I had to or thought I would have to seek out or accept assistance in order to make ends meet. During the last week of April, I noticed a sign that simply read, "Food Shelf, Friday, 6 p.m." At first, I didn't think anything of it, but having walked by it every day that week, by Friday, I was asking myself if that could be meant for me. It was a hard truth to admit. I walked through your doors not knowing what to expect, hoping that some basic staples might be available, perhaps a pound or two of rice or pasta. Instead, I was surprised by the immediate offerings of protein, eggs, and beef, and thoughtfully prepared hot meals. Although I was out of my element, all who provided were pleasantly matter-of-fact as they packed containers and bags with care. As I ascended the stairs, I was humbled and thankful, ashamed and grateful, all at once. I walked slowly down the sidewalk to the corner until I realized that someone was behind me, and I stepped aside to get out of their way. But when I stopped, 2 young adults, each holding a large grocery bag, stopped and faced me. They keenly interpreted my look of confusion, and I was told, "These are for you." I stammered a bit, trying to explain that there must be a mistake, but they patiently assured me that the goods were in fact intended for me. The young adults had followed me out the door and down the street with such calm demeanor and quiet devotion, it felt as though I would have been silently shadowed for miles had I not realized their presence. I explained that I didn't have a car there, that I was walking home, and they carefully and graciously loaded my arms with their gifts. I thanked them as many times as I could before turning away so that they would not see me cry. Once home, I surveyed the unexpected bounty, canned vegetables, soup, even coffee, and yes, those staples of grain. As I carefully assigned each item a spot on otherwise bare shelves, I began to realize the most important commodities I had received that day, the staples of kindness, warmth, generosity, and neighborliness. It is that for which I thank you the most. So I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak and for you choosing to support the Have a Heart Food Shelf. We are most grateful for your support. And God bless and have a happy Mother's Day.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Allison. So, as Allison said, it's often hard for people who need something to get to the point where they accept it. But it isn't hard for us to know that we're needed to support as generously as we can when the collection plate passes. So I invite you to do that. Thank you.
And as the offering is brought forward, we'll sing the song we usually sing.
Thank you all so much for your generosity. So I have a few milestones and passages to share with you. The first is from Poppy Reese and her mom, Bobby Loney. We are grateful for all the loving communication and offers of help. This has to do with Bobby's husband and Poppy's father, Jerry. There's not much to help with now, but we'll let you know. Jerry is currently at Porter Hospital, not the rehab center. His breathing continues to have big issues. He's in a very hard and emotional time. We're not able to respond to most questions that come in email, etc. But keep sending us big love. And of course we will. I've been an intermediary for some of these communications, and I know that Jerry's condition has changed so often that it's hard for me to give you straight information. So if folks can just send love and not be asking exactly what's going on, we'll let you know whenever there's a definitive turn one way or another. If you're visiting and don't know Jerry, he's been a pillar of our community for such a long time. And he had pneumonia with COVID and then a stroke on top of that, which is contributing to the very unstable situation he's in now, and to our concern for the whole family. I have a card also from Marnie Wood. It's a personal milestone and tremendous gratitude for all the loving support from this congregation. It has now been 1 year since my medical event last May, which was also a stroke. I hope you don't mind my saying. I'm grateful for the healthy life I have now. And Marnie, we're so grateful that you're back with us. I know being careful about COVID and everything like that, it's not that you can't stand to be near us. But you're in all of our hearts, and we're so glad you're back among us. I wanted to mention, for everybody who doesn't get the Addison Independent, you might not have seen this article, but the Addison Independent got a lot of awards in the last issue. And 2 of the awards were very important, I think, for us to note here in this congregation. Carl Lindholm was the best sports columnist among all of the small papers of New England, and a column that John Barstow conceived of called Climate Matters won the paper an award for general excellence in terms of its relationship with its community, because that column is filled week after week by people in the community, not the staff of the Addison Independent. And in this congregation, Richard Hopkins and Steve Meyer have contributed multiple columns to Climate Matters. I've written for it, and we were racking our brains. I wouldn't be surprised if there's someone else here who's written for it that we didn't name yet. We know several other people are teed up to do it. Rich, did you do one? No. Okay. Anyway, it's a great contribution to life in the community. You will now, right? It's a great contribution to life in our community. We're really proud of John for coming up with this idea and seeing it through to execution. And finally, I just want to note that sometime in the next week or two, the beautiful photos in the fellowship hall that Eric Nelson has had up for a long time are going to be taken down. They're going to be rotated into exhibition of quilts that people in the congregation have done. So last chance to get down and really look at that incredible photography of Eric's. It wasn't mentioned in the order of service, but it is May birthdays month, so there'll be a big carrot cake as part of social hour as well. I can see people texting to revise their plans for when they're leaving. We always leave a moment of silence for people to get in touch with what's on their heart, because we know there are always unspoken joys and concerns, milestones and passages. So I invite you into that time of silence. And to repeat what Ellen said in the call to worship, you may get into what's on your heart by meditating about all of the people in your life, not just women, who have showed you mothering.
We'll sing the 23rd Psalm now with words by Bobby McFerrin. This is 1038 in the Teal Hymnal. I will kind of lead along the first halves of the phrases, and then you can respond at the end. The choir will help you out. So here it is. The Lord is my shepherd, I have all I need. She makes me lie down in green meadows, beside the still waters she will lead. She restores my soul, she rights my wrongs. She leads me in the path of good things. She fills my heart with songs. Even though I walk through a dark and dreary land, there is nothing that can shake me.
She has said she won't forsake me. I'm in her hand. She sets a table before me in the presence of my foes. She anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely, surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will live in her house forever, forever and ever. Glory be to our mother and daughter, and to the Holy of Holies. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
The first reading this morning, followed by a reading done in song, is Born, excerpted by the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska, winner of the 1996 Nobel Prize for Literature from the collection No End of Fun in 1967. We are coming upon the 100th anniversary of her birth this summer. So this is his mother, the boat in which years ago he sailed to shore, the boat from which he stepped into the world to uneternity. She herself pulled him into the skin I know, bound him to the bones that are hidden from me. She herself raised the gray eyes that he raised to me. So he was born too, born like everyone else, like me who will die, the son of an actual woman, a new arrival from the body's depths, a voyager, subject to his own absence on every front at any moment. His movements dodge and parry the universal verdict. I realized that his journey was already halfway over, but he didn't tell me that. No. This is my mother, is all he said.
School bag in hand, she leaves home in the early morning, waving goodbye with an absent-minded smile. I watch her go with a surge of that well-known sadness, and I have to sit down for a while. The feeling that I'm losing her forever, and without really entering her world. But when I ever share her laughter, that funny little girl, slipping through my fingers all the time, I try to find it every minute, the feeling in it, slipping through my fingers all the time, Do I really see what's in her mind? Each time I think I'm close to knowing, she keeps on growing, slipping through my fingers all the time. Sleep in our eyes, her and me at the breakfast table, barely awake, letting precious time go by. Then when she's gone, there's that odd melancholy feeling and a sense of guilt I can't deny. What happened to the wonderful adventures, the places I had planned for us to go? Well, some of that we did, but most we didn't, and why I just don't know. It's slipping through my fingers all the time. I try to capture every minute, the feeling in it, slipping through my fingers all the time. Do I really see what's in her mind? Each time I try, but goes to knowing, she keeps on growing, slipping through my fingers all the time. Sometimes I wish that I could freeze the picture and save it from the funny tricks of time slipping through my fingers. Slipping through my fingers all the time. School bag in hand, she leaves home in the early morning, waving goodbye with an absent-minded smile.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Those of you who have followed my 11 years here know I'm usually reluctant to be in the pulpit on Mother's Day, or if I'm here to talk about Mother's Day. And I inherited this from my wife being an elementary school teacher. And she learned early on that in this city where she was teaching, there were always students with a mother in prison, a mother dead, different difficulties in the house. And she felt for the students who were in secure, happy homes that fit the Hallmark holiday Mother's Day image, it wasn't worth it to put the other students through the pain of making that celebration in school. And I realized that in our congregation, we also have this mix of experiences with our biological mothers. And I just felt inadequate year after year to really address that. The one time I did was 10 years ago, and maybe you remember, it wasn't a particularly happy sermon. I was criticizing our society's disturbing attempt to take anything that is beautiful in its inception and make it into a commercial opportunity. And I told you something about the history of Mother's Day as a holiday. One of the important people in creating the American Mother's Day movement was the Unitarian Julia Ward Howe, who was an abolitionist, best known for writing the Battle Hymn of the Republic to the words of an old tune. John Brown's Body was the most recent vintage of that tune when she wrote it. In her version, Mine Eyes Have Seen the Glory of the Coming of the Lord was published in 1862 in the early days of the Civil War. But shortly after the Civil War, she began using her fame to campaign for the creation of a Mother's Day in which women all over the world would come together on that day and campaign for world peace and an end to centuries and centuries and centuries of shipping their husbands and sons off to become cannon fodder. The pacifist words ring very stirring even today, and I don't want you to pick up your hymnal and look, but they're number 573 in the hymnal if you want to look for them at some point. Her work in those days right after the Civil War more or less coincided with the work of a West Virginian named Anne Reeves Jarvis, who gathered wives and daughters everywhere she went and tried to bring them together from both sides of the Civil War and create reconciliation. She called what she did creating Mothers' Friendship Days. And when she died in 1905, her daughter was so upset and was struggling to figure out how she could memorialize her mother, so she began a national campaign to create a holiday to honor the sacrifice of all mothers for all of their children. And she proved to be a genius organizer. And by 1914, Woodrow Wilson was signing a law that created Mother's Day as a national holiday. But by then, it was already on its way to becoming a big business for industries, making gifts of all sorts. It became so big that Anna Jarvis spent the last years of her life trying to get people not to celebrate it and saying how disgusted she was that the holiday had been so thoroughly divorced from its roots in gratitude for love that can never be repaid with material gifts. Now, my favorite part of that service 10 years ago, in retrospect, as I read it over, was a reading by the humor columnist Irma Bombeck, in which she was imagining God creating a mother. Now, God has a helper in this column. It's a very supportive angel that fears God is overtaxing his creative power with everything he's trying to put into the mother. He's giving the mother eyes that can see through walls so she can know what her children's up to when they're out of sight, and another set of eyes in the back of her head so she can see what's happening when she's not looking that direction, and the ability to feed a whole family of 6 with a pound of hamburger, and so on. And at one point, the worried angel says to God, "Can it think?" And Bombeck continues, "Not only can it think, but it can reason and compromise," said the Creator. Finally, the angel bent over and ran her finger across the cheek. "There's a leak," she pronounced. "I told you that you were trying to put too much into this model." "It's not a leak," said the Lord. "It's a tear." "What's it for?" "It's for joy, sadness, disappointment, pain, loneliness, and pride." "You're a genius," said the angel. Somberly, God said, "I didn't put it there." Now, you just heard a whole bunch of that same complexity about mothering in the song that Sydney sang for you and for her mother, Cass. I contacted Sydney to see if she would be willing to do something because, as many of you who are regulars know, Cass has been through a lot in the last 18 months, and the whole family has. Sydney's father, Cass's husband, Ian, died a little over a year ago. Cass has been overworked at the college because 2 people in her department are gone and the college has not hired replacements. She's been a secretary of our board through all of this. And this is not the easy mothering. And yet Cass has stood there mothering not only her own kids, but all of us through this. And I wanted Sydney to have a chance to honor that. And I think you could feel it in how she sang. So once again, thank you. I wanted to, though, enlarge on this to say there's some very ancient perspectives on the complexity of motherhood that I came across this week, and it made me feel better about actually talking to you about motherhood. And one of the oldest predates Christianity and probably even Judaism. It comes from India, and it sees female divine power residing in 7 different types of motherhood. There is the biological mother who creates, maintains, and does her best to transform us into the best versions of ourselves. provides material needs, and as we now know, starts affecting us even when we're in the womb. But the second mother in these ancient times, the second mother figure, was the wife of the guru or teacher, because it was common at age 5 or 6 to send children for education to live with a teacher, and the wives of these teachers often provided the warmth and mothering away from home that the children were missing. And then there was a third motherhood, the wives of sages, the ancient equivalents to ministers and priests. And they had a tendency to get so caught up in being priestly that they sometimes forgot how you treat children. There's a story about the god Krishna walking the earth with his friends who were boys who were cowards, not cowards, C-O-W-A-R-D-S, cowherders. And the cowherds were very hungry, and Krishna was aware of a priestly ritual being performed nearby that often involved a lot of cooking and sacrifices of food. So he sent the boys over to ask the priests for some food because they were so hungry, and the priests totally ignored the boys, and they came back hungrier than ever. And then Krishna said, "Go find the wives of the priests." And the wives immediately recognized these hungry children, and feeling immense love and compassion, they fed them something, and then they brought food back to where the children were working, brought a feast to them. And this natural display of unconditional love and service, which ironically is the goal of the spiritual ritual they were preparing, shamed the priests into realizing that they had misunderstood their first duty on earth and that they needed to show compassion. In this culture, a fourth mother was the queen, since the king was an ideal of caring for the people, supposedly, and the queen was the person who made sure the king didn't forget that. The fifth form of mothering was the cow. Her milk sustained humans as well as her own offspring. Worship of this form of motherhood taught wider respect for nature of all divine things and for stewardship of animals. And a sixth form of motherhood, all part of this sense of one thing, was associated with all other caregivers, nurses, siblings who took care of people when they were sick, other relatives, anyone in the neighborhood who was a caregiver. And the seventh form of motherhood was Earth herself, abundant, generous, requiring nothing in return. So that sweeping image of motherhood centers the kind of diverse love that's in the thoughts and prayers of Unitarian Universalists today, and it's part of our movement, actually, to redefine our whole set of principles around the word love, which you've been hearing about as the Article 2 debate. And it's also in the recentering of the 23rd Psalm that we just sang about. You know, we are leaning these days in our congregations more and more into the love traditionally associated with mothering than traditionally associated with the fatherhood of God. So this alone would be enough for me to break my habit of never addressing Mother's Day in the pulpit on my last Sunday, Mother's Day Sunday, serving you. But there's also the truth of what happened with my mother during my 11 years here. As those of you who've been around, my first year here, we needed to bring her here when she was a widow and suffering strokes at the high altitude of Colorado where she was living. And so she came and became a part of the congregation. And one of the reasons I'm a minister is I grew up in the Unitarian Church that she helped create in California. And you accepted her and brought her in, even though she was a reminder, as in Szymborska's poem, that I'm only here for a short time because I am born of a mother, like all of us. And then when she eventually died in 2018, you were here to help me through all of that. And I just wanted to say in closing, it's very difficult for congregations, particularly when their ministers are retiring or leaving, unless it's on bad terms, that this idea that the minister isn't here to be your friend, they're here to be your minister. And I've gone around saying to you, well, after all this is over and you've got a new minister, in a few years when I can come back as your friend. So, this is going to be good. But it's more than that. You've been my companions through this. You've actually been there with me. And then sometimes you need a companion even more than a friend. So I wanted to talk about Mother's Day this Sunday to thank you for all of that, for all the ways you've been my companions as well as the congregation. And with that, I'm going to invite you into singing our last hymn. Ronnie, do you have anything you want to say about it? It's not one we've sung a lot, but the choir knows it and is going to help us along. So in this modern hymn, you see a through line back to Julia Ward Howe and our 19th century roots as Unitarians and Universalists, and after 1961, Unitarian Universalists. I invite you to go forth this week thinking of the huge opening you have in living a more meaningful life if you really expand your understanding of mothering to include something that we can all do at any time in many ways, and then can radicalize with a little extra gesture. And so think about that while you're enjoying our maize cake, while you're talking to Steve and Rich. If you're new, while you're signing the guest book on your way out, so you can stay in touch with us. And I look forward to next week when we're doing the bridging ceremony for our kids.